You good, Barb? Okay. Thank you, everyone, for joining us for the opening of the March 7th, 2022 planning meeting. Please join me in the Pledge of Allegiance. Pledge allegiance
to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Roll call, Ms. Williams.
Mr. DiTullio?
Here.
Mrs. Turchek?
Here.
Mr. Kashani?
Here.
Mrs. Brusalis?
Here.
Mr. Cassidy?
Here.
Mrs. Hillman?
Here.
Mr. Lyons?
Here.
Dr. Mihalik?
Here.
Dr. Meyer?
Here.
Thank you.
Before proceeding, I would like everyone to please join in a moment of silence in memory of retired Pine-Richland teacher Joe Linz and Pine-Richland High School custodian Alex Petrov. Thank you. Item 1.02 is a happy part of the meeting. With gratitude, it's a citation presentation from Representative Ms. Gorski and Representative McCurry for the MAPE Excellence. And Dr. Miller.
Thank you. Well, good evening, everybody. Thanks for having us, for making time on the agenda. This is a happy part of the meeting, and we're here to celebrate an accomplishment. We are privileged to be a part of this school district. My wife and I have 3 kids. My son is with me today, our 3rd grader. And the accomplishment that we're here to recognize is the result of a lot of hard work, and a lot of hard work through a difficult period of time. And it represents scholastic achievement and holistic administrative achievement and teaching excellence, the depth of which is worth noting. And Representative Ms. Gorski and I share Pine-Richland, and we are very proud of this school district. So we have the privilege, really, of representing this fine district, and we get to celebrate that moment with you today. We've got a citation that we will leave with you today, and it does leave this kind of as an official accomplishment, this Mid-Atlantic award that is very unique and very rare among national school districts. And so it's worth taking a moment and recognizing this even amidst a turbulent time, and with everything else going on. This is worth noting and recognizing. I would say, too, that it doesn't happen by accident or by itself, that the confluence of hardworking and dedicated teachers, families, parents, and students who want to learn, who want to dig in every day, a talented and administration, and a volunteer board that has been focused and continues to be focused. Everybody contributes to the efforts and gets us to this place. Last thing I'll say, then I'll turn it quickly over to Rep. Ms. Gorski. The pandemic did have a very big impact on schools and on learning in particular. And as controversial as many issues were, it was the learning that really suffered through the pandemic. We got results last week on Friday that we've been waiting to see what was in the results from PSSAs and Keystones. And across the state, the results were quite alarming. Across math, reading, and science, it was that the results were in the high 30s, the mid 40s and 50s in terms of statewide averages of proficient or advanced. And that's not good across the state. The story's different in Pine-Richland. It's actually drastically different. And the results in Pine-Richland were, it varies depending on what school you're looking at, but it was very near the top. It was in the 70s, the 80s, the 90s, which is something that we should all be proud of. Despite the challenges, we're in a good place. So congratulations to everybody.
Thank you, and it's actually been my honor to come back here for the second time. I appreciated that I was able to attend the ceremony where you received the Mid-Atlantic Alliance for Performance Excellence. I hope I got that right. And at that time, I talked about how the importance of that as individuals and an organization, that you work together to make those changes and that you were recognized for that, and also how that set an example for all of your students, that you are capable of working on goals together and making those changes. And as the test results show, it has been effective for you. So I congratulate you again on receiving this award, and wish you the best, and hope the rest of your meeting goes well. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Sure, we can do it.
Thank you. Thank you. Congratulations.
Thank you, Ryan.
Great to see you guys.
See you.
Thank you so much. Good to see you. It's a lot drier on there, for sure. Congratulations. Thank you. Thank you. We will now move to item 1.03, recognition of visitors. At this time, any member of the Pine-Richland community may address the board. We're going to have a timer of 3 minutes. I do know we have a lot of visitors today from outside the district. I will stress that per board policy, our policy is that this is a time for residents to address the board with concerns addressing our current agenda items, and members outside the district are welcome to email us and contact us, but it is our board policy, which if no one likes that policy, we're actually going to be addressing in the 900s today, but that is our current board policy.
I have a quick question about that policy, Greg. At the bottom of the policy under guidelines, it explicitly states, anyone representing a group or a person in the community or the school district is allowed to speak. Considering the AIU represents our special needs students, a lot of our teachers get professional development for them from the AIU, I'm wondering why that clause does not apply to the situation.
Well, I actually had a conversation with our solicitor today to clarify this, and his guidance was that within the realm of what it says, what the way the policy is written, that it would not apply unless those members outside the community happen to own property and or pay taxes within the community. That was the guidance from Dawn.
Greg, I have his email, so I'd say two things. First, you said the policy explicitly says residents and taxpayers only. Is that true?
No, that's not what I said. I said it's a time for residents to address. But you are correct. If somebody's representing an attorney, and if you want to make this an argument, Peter, we can just go to a vote and say, who wants to allow people outside?
No, I just want to understand.
But we have a policy.
I'm just asking you some questions, Greg.
I asked
Don't
the
get
solicitor specifically.
Greg, I'm just asking you questions.
The guidance was, could we make exceptions? Yes, we can make exceptions. If we want to start making exceptions to policies, then policies become lenient, right? So my theory is, let's stick with the policy. If we want to deviate from policy, we're going to be reviewing the 900 policies starting today. We can take this policy and look at it. But the way the policy is written is the way that I'm going to enforce the policy.
Greg, I understand, but it's the misrepresentation that I just want to point out. First of all, the policy, as you stated, does not limit to residents. I can think of numerous times, in fact, during the pandemic, when non-residents spoke, and prior. So that's not, we don't have to dig back far. So that's first thing. I think that's a misrepresentation. Second of all, nowhere in Mr. Palmer's email does he say this would not apply. He does specify that the board can interpret, but he does not say that that exclusion does not apply. We all have Mr. Palmer's email, and the public can certainly request that as well. So I just wanted to point that out because I think those are two misrepresentations.
Yeah, and what I would just say is we have a very significant stakeholder here, that the relationship with the AIU is a critical one for our district. And the relationship is very important, and we have people who have come from that organization and have important things to say that I think we all probably might want to hear. I think for the sake of transparency and openness and dialogue, it makes sense to allow interested stakeholders on a material vote issue. If they have important information, we may want to consider weighing that information rather than taking a very narrow definition of a policy and, not hear what would be relevant information.
So again, I hear what everyone's saying, but it is up to the board. It is not up to me. My interpretation, I gave it. Basically, we can do a vote of the board or a consensus of the board.
I would offer,
as-
before we call the vote, I'd offer one more point. I mean, quite explicitly, item 4.06, this board is considering the AIU Program of Services budget. Services provided to, Greg, do you know who those services are being provided to?
Well, there's a lot of people in the district. My
To Pine-Richland. By whom?
By the AIU.
By the AIU.
Yes.
In what world, then, do AIU representatives not qualify under our board policy? I mean, you're saying it's up to the board to decide. I understand that. But isn't it up to us to follow policy first?
And my interpretation is I believe I'm following policy and in consultation with the solicitor. Again, that was my conversation with the solicitor this morning. That's who I rely on.
He said you could do this by vote, but he didn't say that the AIU doesn't provide services. To be clear, Greg, I mean, you're misrepresenting that email
I
blatantly.
specifically asked him, I said, do the services that the AIU talk about, this is my conversation with them, that they talk about and that they provide, does that explicitly in our policy say that they would be people that would be represented and then could speak? He said, no, it does not specifically state that.
I'm reading his email. It doesn't say that at all.
Again, this was my conversation.
Matt, do you have the email as well?
I have the email as well.
Doesn't
and
say that.
It does not.
Yeah.
It gives us discretion. And again, I come back to, if there's useful information that can weigh an important item that's being discussed tonight, I would think we would want to hear that. I would be interested in hearing reasons why we shouldn't hear that information.
And again, the board can make that decision. It
Well,
seems
we're
like-
asking why. I
well,
mean, so I guess what I'm saying is.
So
it's
anyone else
fine.
in the board can weigh in. I'm going to
Greg, you can
interpret it.
simply say no. I understand that.
I'm going to interpret
And you
it
can
that
give,
it-
and you can give no reason. But when you're referencing and misrepresenting first our policy and then an email from the solicitor,
I did not.
I'm going to point that out.
I did not misrepresent our policy.
you did. You stated to
not.
the entire audience that
It's
only
for our
residents
tax
were
rep
allowed to speak.
and representatives.
It's an interpretation that's probably narrower than what was intended. So, it's not.
Again,
it's
we
not,
can clarify that as we go through 915. We can also clarify that tonight with the whole board.
But the sequencing matters
Yeah, I
here.
said 915, sorry, it's 903. It's in the 903 policies.
Yeah, but
And we
we-
will be reviewing tonight.
Yeah, but we may have missed important information by that point. So it doesn't make sense.
I'm going to assume that no one's going to discuss the approval of the AIU services, and that it will be for the recommendation and nomination of Peter Lyons. And if I just do a consensus between all the AIU members who are here, they're going to state, I'm going to assume, they're going to state that they're behind Peter Lyons to be receiving a nomination. Would everyone agree with that?
I don't think you should substitute your voice for theirs.
I'm
But you
trying
just
to get a
did.
consensus. I'm
You
trying
just
to get
did.
a consensus of what we believe is going to be stated.
I don't know. I think the details
Based
matter.
on the emails we received, do you believe that that's going to be, is that a relatively simple expectation?
I think it's not even just my interpretation. I think this is a public meeting. So I think people should hear that. Like, you've seen that information. I've seen some of that information. but there are thousands of people in this district that have not.
And therefore, again, it's debated, so I believe that we open it up to the board and find out, do we want to let people outside the district that do not have an interest per board policy speak tonight?
I think that's too broadly construed.
And specifically, I will state AIU board members.
Are we taking a vote? Is that what we're doing?
Well, we will.
I-
I want
Right now.
anyone else to
I
weigh in.
think,
with their-
I think a better framing of it is if there are people outside the district that have material, important information and issues in terms of business with this district and board, whether we should hear from them or not. And I would say yes.
But we
Not
have heard from
over
them.
broadly
We've received
construing
emails,
it.
and that's the proper way for them to communicate with us.
The community has not heard from them.
There are tens of thousands
Greg,
of
can we
people
just
that
take a
haven't
vote?
seen
Yeah,
that.
we
Yeah.
can take a vote. So
We're gonna take a vote.
everyone in favor of, in particular, in specifically, AIU board members addressing the board tonight? Okay.
Yes.
Yes, yes, of course.
All those not in favor?
No.
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 Could we raise hands so we can
Okay.
see?
Do you want a
So
roll
much
call?
for
please.
transparency.
Yeah, why don't we do that?
Okay.
That's just so we can know, we can see it.
Take note of who's not being transparent.
What is the process? Yeah, what is the
It
process?
has to
for-
majority vote. It can be
It's more of
overruled
a
by a
con-
majority of those school directors present and voting, so.
It's not an official motion, it's just a consensus of the board, correct? So, all those in favor, raise your hand, please.
Wait, I thought we were doing roll call.
I'll do,
Raise
Roll
hands.
call?
we can do,
Okay.
yeah, just that way we have it counted.
That's fine.
In favor of allowing
In favor, members
tonight.
to speak tonight.
Yes.
Okay. Mrs. Turchek,
No.
Mr. Cassidy,
No.
Mr. Lyons,
Yes.
Dr. Mahalik,
Yes, of course.
Mrs. Brusalis,
No.
Mr. Kashani,
No.
Mr. DiTullio,
No.
Mrs. Hillman,
No.
Dr. Meyer.
Yes.
Okay, fails, so.
I'll state that we appreciate the AIU's membership. We will continue to be members of the AIU. My daughter receives services from the AIU. But again, this is an interpretation of a board policy you may or may not agree with, but we've got to run a business. The business of the meeting is we hear from our public and we do the business of the board.
Think of the message that was just sent to a key partner.
So, Ms. Williams, recognition?
Our first speaker signed up is Julie Salvaggi.
Hello, everyone. My name is Julie Salvaggi. My address is 1165 Woodhill Drive in Gibsonia, and this is the very first school board meeting I've attended since moving to the district 5 years ago. I'm a busy working parent of 2 PR students in 1st and 5th grade, and it was actually very important to me to take the time to be here tonight so that I can clearly communicate to you my utter disappointment regarding this board's short-sighted decision to remove Mr. Lyons from the board of the Allegheny Intermediate Unit, also known as the AIU. A decision that has neither been explained nor substantiated. In fact, there was no discussion at all. I'm here tonight with other PR parents, staff, and members of the AIU board who all share in my concern, and tonight we're calling on you to reconsider. As most of you know, the AIU oversees and provides special education services, professional development for our teachers, and family support. And as I understand it, they provide almost all of the support services for students with special needs, all of the students with IEPs. Of 42 districts in our county, only 13 are fortunate enough to have representation on the AIU board. Mr. Lyons has represented Pine-Richland on the board since 2016, and he's currently serving as vice president. However, at the tail end of the last already packed meeting, for no clear reason, Mr. DiTullio, Mrs. Turchik, Ms. Hillman, Mr. Cassidy, and Mrs. Brusalis hastily voted to remove Mr. Lyons from his position on the AIU board. Again, no discussion whatsoever. Aside from PR losing its representation and voice on the board, it speaks volumes to the true intention of the members who pushed it through. Remember that these are the same folks who just last fall ran on a platform of transparency and putting our kids first. As a community, we gave you our confidence and you repaid us with political maneuvers and chaos. If there's any perceptible benefit or rationale for taking Mr. Lyons off that board, it's yet to be revealed. In a moment, you're about to hear statements from 7 concerned AIU board members, the majority of the board, detailing Mr. Lyons' history of committed service and offering their full support of retaining him on the board. So we're asking you tonight to make a common sense decision that benefits children and teachers across Allegheny County and specifically Pine-Richland. Make good on your campaign promises to provide transparency and frankly, make better decisions that will actually put our kids first. Save our seat on the AIU table, at the AIU table, and support our students. Thank you.
Thank you. Ms. Williams, next.
The next person is Phil Little. He's an AIU
I'm not allowed to
person.
speak. I'll yield my time. Thank you.
Thank you, Phil.
Next person is Brittany Kindersmith.
I just go whenever. Sorry, it's my first meeting, y'all. Not my last, though. My name's Brittany. We just moved up to this district in November from PPS, a supposedly better school district, which this board is proving to fail at. My address is 5336 Hart Road, and the reason I'm here tonight is because my one child who's already in school and my other child who will be in school in a couple of years both receive services from Allegheny Intermediate Units. I'm going to read this statement that was written by Mr. Little because he is not allowed to speak and address the board. Dear members of the Pine-Richland School Board, I hope that all of you are having a safe and productive year. After receiving several pleas from Pine-Richland parents whose children utilize the Allegheny Intermediate Unit services, I am writing you to strongly reconsider the board's decision not to approve Peter Lyons' candidacy for the AIU Board of Directors. Peter has been an incredible asset to the board. Through his hard work and dedication, I have worked alongside him in shaping the AIU strategic plan, hiring several new members of the executive leadership team, and working with our executive director, Dr. Bob Scherer, to improve on the services it provides to our 42 member school districts. Needless to say, Peter has been an integral part of the board at the AIU. This is why I was so disappointed to witness the actions taken by the board at the February 7th meeting. The decision not only impacts the Pine-Richland School District, but all 42 member districts in Allegheny County. As a member of the AIU board, I'm compelled to write to you, and I hope you understand the impact this decision has made. As a fellow school board member, I urge you to always remember that we must put our children first in every decision we make. Unfortunately, it doesn't seem that that was the case here. With that said, there is still time to rectify this decision, which I urge you to do. As a parent of this district who pays taxes and is a resident in this district, I also urge you to reconsider. Thank you.
Thank you. Next speaker.
Next speaker is Christy Minnick.
Good evening. I'm also a member of the AIU and per your policy not allowed to speak, so I will yield my time. Thank you.
Thank you.
Our next speaker is Judy Masucci.
Doesn't want to stay down. It's hard being only 5 feet tall. My name is Judy Masucci. I've lived in Pine-Richland for 20 years. I am speaking on behalf of Christy Minnick this evening. This is Christy. She is a board member at Deer Lakes. She is not here to represent Deer Lakes or their school board or their district. she is here to endorse Mr. Peter Lyons' candidacy for the AIU Board of Directors. First, Christy appreciates your time and commitment to your community. Serving on a school board is difficult and sometimes overwhelming, but she knows that each of you are here in front of her because you know there is no greater responsibility than the future of our children. Each decision we make must be looked at in a matrix where we must consider each from the perspective of student, district employees, and taxpayer. Much like the rubrics we use in our classroom to assess expectations for our students, we are evaluated by our community during elections. Let's take a rubrics approach to tonight's vote. First, the students. Since the motion failed last month, Christy has been contacted by parents in your district who she does not know. In their emails, they shared heartwarming stories of their students' successes based on services provided by the AIU. They saw a direct connection between their children's success and Mr. Lyons' role on the AIU board. Christy has served on the AIU board for less than a year. However, she has been able to share valuable information about AIU services with the board and administration, and has also seen how AIU representation can be invaluable in our ability to provide free, appropriate public education under Section 504 of the Rehabilitation Act of 1973. 2, let's look at district employees. Before being elected to the AIU board, Christy had no idea the breadth and depth of non-student services offered by the AIU. To go into all of them would consume all of her 3 minutes and then some. Suffice it to say, there are many educational programs, grants, administrative capabilities, legal, marketing, payroll, etc., that can be acquired by the AIU either part-time or full-time. 3, taxpayers. If you have been presented with your annual program of services document that is available to the public on board docs. Many services you contract are not financially feasible to provide on your own. Services like paeducator.net, which is the online employment portal, could not be created by the district at the AIU rate. Same can be said for many, if not all, the services, because if you could, you would. Taxpayers benefit from our fiscal responsibility, and it will be Mr. Lyons who can identify other
If you could
opportunities
please
for
wrap up
cost
your
savings.
comments.
I'm sorry?
If you could please wrap up your
Okay.
comments.
For cost savings because of his role with the AIU. As stated in her previous email to you, her experience with Mr. Lyons has been nothing but positive. He is professional, engaged, provides leadership on the board. He was one of the first board members who congratulated her when she was elected, answers all of her questions, and has been a partner to both David as AIU board president and Dr. Scherer as the AIU executive director. In closing, Christy respectfully requests a unanimous yes vote for Mr. Lyons' AIU nomination. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Next speaker.
Our next speaker is Dawn Augustine.
Hi, my name is Dawn Augustine. I live on High Meadows Drive in Richland. I'm reading a letter on behalf of Jim Bolger, who served alongside Peter Lyons on the board of directors at the Allegheny Intermediate Unit, also known as the AIU. Ladies and gentlemen of Pine-Richland School Board, my name is Jim Bolger. I am the president of Steel Valley School District Board of Directors and a member of the AIU Board of Directors. I'm writing you today to discuss the AIU candidacy of Peter Lyons. I've had the pleasure of knowing Peter Lyons since my first unsuccessful run at the AIU board almost 7 years ago, and have had the pleasure of serving with him for the past 5, once I was finally elected. Peter was very encouraging to me to come back and try again after losing a very close election. That stuck with me, as our districts could not be more different. Your high school has more students than my entire district. Your $92 million budget is 3 times the size of mine, but yet we pay almost 6 times the expense in charter school costs. The fact that someone who won his AIU election took the time out of his day to reach out and encourage me to run again left me to believe that his intentions were genuine, and I had hoped to work with him someday. Fast forward to our time on the AIU board. I have witnessed Peter's leadership in helping guide us in selecting a new executive director and deal with many other challenges that a lesser board member would not have been able to. This includes dealing with other member districts and their issues, dealing with complex personnel issues, and labor negotiations. Peter has always been a man of integrity and someone who, even when there is a disagreement, it is done respectfully. This is why I was disappointed to learn that Peter did not have the support of your board to return to the AIU. I understand that disagreements in policy and other local issues can sometimes cause concern and heated debate, but that debate should never get in the way of someone who is willing to show servant leadership and good work that is appreciated by many. I have received many emails today from your constituents expressing disappointment about the fact that Peter does not have your support to return to the AIU. I hope that these same folks are reaching out to you so that you can get a flavor of how they feel that Peter belongs at the AIU. It is my understanding that you may reconsider this item at your March 7th, 2022 board meeting. I hope at that time you all place your support behind Peter for the work that he has done and will continue to do there. Thank you for your service and your community, and I wish you well.
Thank you.
Next speaker is Rebecca Hoffman.
My name is Rebecca Hoffman. I live on McLeod Drive. I was disappointed last month observing the AIU nomination vote. No rationale was provided to support the decision made, leaving it to appear personal and vindictive. I do not know Mr. Lyons personally, and I certainly don't know how he conducts himself on the AIU board. I don't get the sense that those who voted against him have observed him in that setting either. It seems to me that that is what should decide his capacity to continue in that role. I will now read statements provided by two school board directors of the Allegheny Intermediate Unit. They were unable to attend in person tonight, but wanted their thoughts shared with our school board and community about their experiences working with Mr. Lyons. The first is from Mr. Robert Shagas, Treasurer of the Hampton Township School Board, who serves as the AIU Board Treasurer and President of the AIU Head Start and Early Head Start Governing Board. He states, "It is my understanding that the Pine-Richland School Board at their last meeting would not make the perfunctory endorsement of Peter Lyons so that he could be on the ballot for the pending AIU Board election. I believe that this to be a grave injustice, not only to Mr. Lyons, but to the Pine-Richland School District, which has benefited from Mr. Lyons' role as an elected member of the Allegheny Intermediate Unit Board and his invaluable contributions to the AIU as Treasurer and Vice President of the AIU Board. I have served with Peter on the AIU Board for several years and find his insight, opinions, and managerial structuring a great benefit to all of the students, teachers, and administrators served by the AIU. He has shown all of us on the AIU Board an ability to not only do things right, but more importantly, to do the right thing. Peter more than deserves to be on the AIU ballot for the upcoming AIU Board election. Please reconsider your vote and re-vote in March to endorse his candidacy to the benefit of public education and the children in Allegheny County." The next statement is from AIU Board member Larry Pollock, President of the Allegheny Valley School Board. He states, "As a member of the AIU Board of Directors, I have worked with Mr. Lyons for 5 years. He is a student-first kind of guy and has demonstrated his willingness to put in the work to get a goal completed. When you're lucky, you find people like Pete, not a politician. Thank you. Thank you for your time and attention."
Thank you.
Our next speaker is Ashley Fortier.
Hello, my name is Ashley Fortier, and I live at 123 Blue Heron Drive, Wexford, PA. I am attending tonight's meeting and reading on behalf of an Allegheny Intermediate Unit Board Director, Patrick Sable. The reason I'm doing this is because I attended last month's meeting, but I went home after, I had said my piece and listened to majority of the meeting, not expecting that anything was going to happen towards the tail end. But I was shockingly in disbelief when I got home and continued to listen and saw the vote go off the way it did. Needless to say, I was very disappointed in the lack of transparency, the lack of engagement, the lack of explanation. Even sitting here in the audience listening to people make statements, it's hard to know what you're thinking. You are elected to represent us as residents, as stakeholders, as parents, and I'd love to hear what you are thinking and the reason behind that vote. But for now, I'm going to read the email that was sent. So this is from Patrick Sable. It says, "Dear members of the Pine-Richland School Board, I'm respectfully writing to you on behalf of the endorsement matter of Pine-Richland School Director Peter Lyons as a candidate for re-election to the AIU Board of Directors. It is not my intention to stick my nose into the business of the Pine-Richland School District, but rather to share with you my perspective of Peter Lyons as a colleague and a member of the AIU Board of Directors. I am currently serving in my 9th year as a school board director in the South Park School District. However, my entire career, 38 plus years, has been as a chief finance officer for several school districts in Allegheny County, with the final 10 years as the CFO for the AIU. I have had the good fortune of working with many school directors over the aforementioned time period, and please know that Peter Lyons is one of the very best. I will be competing with Peter Lyons for a re-election seat on the AIU board this spring. Some may think it is not very smart to advocate for your competitor, but in this case, however, I believe just the opposite, and quite frankly, it's the right thing to do. Peter Lyons has served the AIU board and all of its constituencies with dedication and integrity. Mr. Lyons' leadership has helped the AIU successfully achieve several major initiatives, including the hiring of a new executive director, an updated, more appropriate strategic plan, and an employee evaluation instrument that is second to none, just to point out a few items. In conclusion, I am respectfully requesting your consideration to endorse Peter Lyons as a candidate for re-election to the AIU Board of Directors. The school districts in the AIU, with your authorization, deserve to benefit from the talent and skills of Peter Lyons.
Ms. Fortier, if you could finish up, please.
I appreciate your time and attention to this message. Thank you.
Thank you.
Our next speaker is Adriana Alatorre. Is she here? Okay, our next speaker is John Corey.
Hi, I'm John Corey. I live at 306 North Wind Court. Last May, I filed a right to know. That right to know came to an end this past week. The right to know was specifically centered on communication, complaints from parents to this district around bullying, sexual misconduct, and sexual violence in this district. Every school district in Pennsylvania has to file a report with the state. It's called SafeStat. Anybody can look it up. You can look at any district in this state and understand how much, bullying or hazing or other things go on. This district in the last 5 years has reported 11 incidents of bullying and 0 incidents of sexual misconduct of any kind. The right to know ended. I was not able to read emails, and in the end, that's probably the right answer. I don't really want to read emails. I did want to understand what was going wrong here. What we learned was there was 169 separate incidents of complaints in that 5-year period. So the question now remains is why would the district only report 11 if there was 169 incidents reported to the district? So I'm going to forward those email logs, there's no names on them, to all of you board members. I will summarize what I've learned in that window so all of you can understand that. And I would respectfully request that this board look into that matter much further. I do not believe this district is safe from bullying at all on any level, and I don't think it's safe from sexual misconduct either. The night I mentioned this in this exact chamber last summer, Pete Lyons was the president. He chose to use my name that night in very unflattering ways. And I'm okay with all of that. It doesn't really matter to me what he thinks of me. But he was president at the time and chose to act in a very unpresidential manner. I've also listened to the board meetings since the new board has been seated. And there have been multiple times where this is just backfighting and not board-like behavior from Mr. Lyons. I want to remind this district also that there are 4 still open OCR investigations, Federal Office of Civil Rights investigations currently going on. That all happened under the last board, under this exact administration as Pete Lyons as president. I was in this exact room last summer listening to a young girl bravely tell her story of being raped in this school. And our solicitor at Pete Lyons' behest interrupted her multiple times. The most disgusting thing I've ever seen in this district. He also interrupted the father of that rape victim that night. So I'm here to tell you I do not endorse him on any level at all to be on any board. I'll be sending you all an email with the email logs of what I learned from the Right to Know. I wish you luck tonight.
Thank you. Next speaker.
Next speaker is Tom Baxter.
Tom Baxter of Bristlecone Drive, and I wish to address sexual misconduct. In Pine-Richland High School and Middle School in total, every single week, 3 girls are fondled or groped against their will or assaulted sexually in some other way. 3 girls every single week in this district. Those figures are derived from national survey data, where 13% of teen girls say that in the past year they suffered this mistreatment at school. It is happening here. We may also infer that every single week an additional 20 students at Pine-Richland Middle School and High School of all genders are sexually harassed so severely that it negatively affects them. That's 20 students every week. At Pine-Richland specifically, we know that students are terrified to report this because they know that they will be ignored and even retaliated against. No child of any gender can possibly achieve their best in this hostile environment. It's been reported multiple times to the board in the past of Pine-Richland administrators repeatedly and consistently ignoring complaints of sexual assaults and being retaliated against for reporting them. To each board director, I ask you, what are you going to do about this? Think about, number one, as noted by Mr. Corey, the federal government has had Pine-Richland under investigation since 2020 under Mr. Lyons' leadership for more federal sex discrimination violations than any other of the 500 school districts in Pennsylvania. Pine-Richland is the state champion of federal sex discrimination investigations. I ask each board member now, are you currently getting updates from the solicitor about this? Number two, above and beyond that behavior being investigated by the feds, on August 2nd, 2 additional community members courageously brought forth publicly similar reports of the same district administrators, again ignoring reports of sexual violence. Mr. Lyons' board did nothing. What will you do? Number 3, 3 weeks ago, new multiple reports were made to this board in writing of new actions by the same administrators occurring after that August of the same pattern of behavior. Clearly, the administrators view the board's inaction as permission to continue this pattern of behavior without consequence. Therefore, the board's silence now contributes to the sexually harassing, sexually discriminating, oppressive, and sexually threatening culture at Pine-Richland. That affects every student. In closing, there are multiple students in our district being affected by sexual violence and sexual harassment every day. Our students are arguably facing the most sexually discriminating culture in the state because of the board's inaction. The board has still not opened any internal investigation into the administrator's misconduct, thereby giving board approval for it to continue. We now have a new board and new board leadership. I ask each of you, what are you going to do about it?
Mr.
One more
Baxter, if you could
sentence.
reach out. Yep.
Let's have this openly debated, and let's see where each individual board member stands on this and feels about sexual oppression, sexual discrimination of students in our district. Thank you.
Thank you.
Our next speaker is Jennifer Buse.
Hi, I'm Jennifer Buse. I live in Richland. I'm the parent of 4 kids at the 4 different levels of Pine-Richland. I had a prepared statement that I was going to make, but Adriana Alatorre wasn't able to make it in time, so instead I'll read hers. At the February 7th meeting, I praised Mr. DiTullio for the professional way in which he emails me back, as opposed to the way Ms. Turchik does. In the past, he has stated he doesn't like the way Mr. Lyons addresses people. That is a valid concern that he should address, but this type of concern should not be the reason to punish Mr. Lyons, such as voting to remove him from the AIU board. They are unrelated issues, and Mr. DiTullio himself has spoken against these types of actions. For example, I don't know what meeting date this was. In April or May of 2020? 2021. This was from the board meeting, Mr. DiTullio.
On the topic of Board President Peter Lyons, it is no secret that Peter and I are not political allies. We disagree on almost every political issue that I can think of. We have never until now, I don't believe, agreed on a controversial issue. We have never had a vote that's been divided where Peter and I were on the same side. I've heard people ask for Peter to resign. I've heard people say disparaging things about Peter. They've tried to bring up things from his past and say that he should resign from the board or we should force him out. Nothing, to my knowledge, about Peter Lyons says that he should be removed from office. He was duly elected multiple times in his region. And I will make it clear, and this may upset Peter, I'm not in his region, but I would oppose Peter. It's just where our political views are, and that's okay.
So Mr. DiTullio should be consistent with his statements and not only feel this way when he is in the same boat as Mr. Lyons, facing threats and uproar from the community, but in all situations. Please reconsider and vote to keep Mr. Lyons on PR's voice in the AIU. And then I just wanted to say from my statement that I was prepared to say is that Mr. Cassidy and Ms. Brusalis, I emailed both of you in regards to your feelings on the DI initiatives in the district, and I'm looking forward to hearing back from you. I just feel like everybody is afraid to talk about it in public, so thank you.
Thank you.
Our next speaker is David, I believe it's Shop.
I'm David Skopp. I'm president of the AIU board, but per your vote, I would not be allowed to speak, so I'll yield my time.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Our next speaker is Chris Bonneau.
Hello, Chris Bono, West Grove Drive. I'm here to speak for those who are not allowed to speak. Good evening. I'm David Skopp, president of the Allegheny Intermediate Unit, Board of Directors. Actually, I wouldn't mind that. For 16 years, a school board director at the Brentwood Borough School District, and also president-elect of the Pennsylvania School Board Association. Tonight, you will be considering passage of the Allegheny Intermediate Unit Program of Services budget. This budget is one that has been prepared through collaboration of business managers and superintendents from all over the county. That's what the AIU does. Collaborate with our 42 districts in Allegheny County to help provide the best education for all our children. You will have noticed when reviewing the budget, the section prepared specifically for Pine-Richland. There are 66 of the AIU's programs or services that Pine-Richland utilizes. That includes autistic support, transition to kindergarten support, participation in the regional-wide area network, support for those deaf or visually impaired, support for gifted education, advanced placement training, waterfront learning cyber programs for your students, and so many more. In other words, the AIU is a very real part of the exemplary education you offer at Pine-Richland. That good work of the AIU is overseen by the Board of Directors, for which your own Peter Lyons serves as Vice President. And therefore, Pine-Richland is at the table where decisions are made for the whole county. You have received letters from a majority of that very same board in support of Peter Lyons as a candidate in the upcoming election. Those letters of recommendations come from directors of both large and small districts, some of your neighboring districts, and from Republicans and Democrats all across the county. The executive director of the AIU, Dr. Robert Scherer, the leading education professional for public education in Allegheny County, even wrote a letter of his support in support of his being nominated to run for office. All of those letters are heartfelt and easy to write because we have seen the leadership he has brought to the AIU. At my home board, we always talk about visualizing the children of our district being in the middle of our boardroom to ground our decision-making. We don't take votes without considering what is best for those children, moving well beyond the political differences and personalities all of our boards have. Your district will be well served by approving the AIU Program of Services budget tonight. For all the children of Allegheny County, the AIU will be well served if Peter Lyons is at least given the chance to run for another term. Thank you.
Thank you.
That was our final.
Is there anyone online?
There's not.
All right. We will now move to item 1.04, correspondence. Ms. Williams.
The following people emailed the board regarding the health and safety plan: Brad Balkovic, Jason and Amy Bowser, and Krista Romano. The following people emailed the board regarding the Pine-Richland board representative at the AIU: Ashley Fortier, Judy Bonsucci, Rebecca Hoffman, Adrian Gregorowitz, Brian Foote, Larry Pollock, Marcy Fisher, Phil Little, Katie Postrich, Robert Sages, Ryan Fortier, Emily Robibero, Chris Bonneau, Adriana Alatorre, David Shop, Jim Bolger, Christy Minnick, Patrick Sable, and Rebecca Hoffman. The following people emailed the board: Jennifer Buse regarding the AIU Policy 832 and Health and Safety, Ann Serafini regarding additional pay for employees, Greg and Laura Rich regarding cancellation of the French trip, Allison Duncan and a signed petition regarding the AIU board representative, Laura Potosky regarding transparency and respect, Jennifer Mahoney regarding drop-off and pickup procedures at the high school. Thank you.
Thank you. Item 1.05 is a motion to approve the meeting minutes as attached.
Second.
Motion's been made and seconded. Is there any discussion? All those in favor?
Yes.
Yes.
Opposed? Motion passes. Item 2.01 is a health and safety update, and I will turn this over to Dr. Miller.
Okay, thank you. Good evening, everyone. For the first time in almost 2 years, we do not have a slide deck for the health and safety update, which we view as a positive thing. Again, as we know, effective February 16th at Pine-Richland, it was a mask optional environment within the schools. As we continue to track student and staff cases, our average each day is just one case. So remember back early January, we were averaging about 30 cases per day. We're now averaging one case of student or staff member per day, and we've been there for about a week now. The need for school-based quarantine, again, is almost non-existent. It is very low. Student and staff attendance continues to be excellent, and that's excellent for any winter, so really good attendance in the schools. Since our last meeting on February 7th, again, we went mask optional on the 16th. On the 25th, the CDC did make an adjustment in how they determine transmission, and so the county is now considered in low transmission. And effective that time, the recommendation shifted from the CDC. They also changed the recommendations or requirements for transportation. So on February 28th, we communicated with our families about that. So again, at this point, we are mask optional in all environments during the school day, outside of the school day, and on the school bus. Cases continue to be very low. The need for school-based quarantine, almost non-existent. The other mitigation is in place. The one area that continues to come up in dialogue would be around when does the district make a decision based on guidance, in my view, to stop the contact tracing quarantine process. And again, we would look at the Allegheny County Health Department and the CDC guidelines as the time and place to do that. That would be our recommendation. As of last Thursday, Allegheny County Health Department continues to put the expectation on schools to conduct contact tracing and quarantine. Again, good news is that has been limited just based on averaging one case per day. So it's our recommendation, again, at this point, keep doing what we're doing. Things are shifting quickly, and we know that Allegheny County Health Department is communicating with the state, so both PA Department of Health, really, and then PDE is connected to that, looking for that time when we can remove that last piece or requirement for schools. Thank you.
Dr. Miller, when we met with the teachers the other day, there were some concerns. They felt that they have kids in their classroom sitting just a few feet apart without masks, and now we're back to lunch and we're all spread apart at lunch, and they were kind of asking when is that going to, kind of make sense that the kids could sit together and, at lunch and not be so spread apart?
Yeah, it's a great question, and I'm glad that you had a chance to meet with them. And that's when we had the Healthcare Leadership Council, and we stopped that group, as you know, in early January. But we had the teachers as a representative group on that council. So in each and every one of the 20 meetings we had since June of 2020, we had that stakeholder viewpoint, and that was excellent and I think important for us. So I think a couple of things. One, we'd like to increase ridership on the buses. So we continue to have a whole lot of parents who have been incredible throughout the pandemic, helping us by driving their kids to school. And that is a good thing from the standpoint of number of kids on the bus. That is a tough thing when it comes to arrival and dismissal at some of our schools, particularly this campus. The other area is the cafeteria. So our perspective would be, as soon as that expectation to contact trace from Allegheny County Health Department is over, then that would be a great time to both try to increase ridership and move back into the regular cafeteria structure. And again, we're hopeful that that's sooner rather than later. We just can't define what soon means. Again, things changed significantly even since February 7th when we were last together.
Greg, based off what you said about the contact tracing is relatively, you don't do it anymore, as far as it's only very little, right?
The contact tracing happens when there's a positive
Correct,
case
but it's
identified.
very little happening
The need
right
for
now.
quarantine has been few and far between.
So, that really is Allegheny County Health Department's job. Why are we continuing having the teachers do their job for them? So I really would like to make a motion to immediately remove contact tracing and quarantine from the schools.
Before an official motion, I don't know if that was an official because we'd have to language it.
Yeah.
But my just take on this is, and I don't know who would share this, but my take is that we're talking about health and safety. Let's put a plan in place. I agree. I totally disagree that we should still be doing it. But I also think that just releasing it here from a transparency standpoint and also from the standpoint of getting everyone ready, if we basically target a date in the way the date would go, because our next voting meeting would be March 21st, that effective the 22nd, unless Allegheny County has done so before then, at the 22nd meeting, we would vote on that for then the next day, contact tracing and quarantine to end. That would allow planning time. I believe it's a pretty simple plan. I'm saying it's simple. What they're doing is very complex, but I think removing it would be less so complex than what what you have to put into it to do it. But my recommendation would be, instead of motioning tonight and doing that, that we formally put it on the agenda for the 21st for a vote on the for a action effective the 22nd.
I'm a little confused here. I thought we had a discussions about motives or motions and letting board leadership know ahead of time. That way the rest of the board.
I did.
So that way the rest of the board.
Why isn't it on the agenda then? Did board leadership discuss this motion ahead of time?
Board leadership discussed it with Dr. Miller, yes.
And did you guys agree to put it on the agenda?
We did not.
And Joe, and your reaction to that is?
We like to continue chaos?
I'm just going to do it anyway. I mean, well, what do we have norms for?
Well,
and by the way, Greg.
He said he would like to make a motion. It's not an official motion.
Greg,
this is a discussion right
Greg,
now. Yes.
Your job as president is to enforce those norms. Accountability is uncomfortable, but honestly.
Did I say that I'm going to allow the motion? But if somebody does put a motion on, Peter, and it's seconded, then we'd have to vote to put it on the agenda. Okay, what I'm telling you right now is I would not vote to put it on the agenda tonight. What I'm discussing is a future date that we put it on, which March 21st feels like the date to me.
So, and this is a planning meeting we're at right now, right?
This is a planning
And the purpose of the planning meeting, you've been here 8 years, is what?
We're planning, and that's exactly what we're doing.
We're planning, wait for it, we're planning, and you'll see these items that are for a vote at
The next
the
meeting.
next meeting. So why, again, I will ask, is this item not on the agenda tonight?
It
If
was,
you're-
it was asked for action.
It's
We
the latest
discussed it.
gotcha game that's being
It's just,
played here.
Greg, it was then say, I mean, this is uncomfortable for me as it is for you. Then the proper thing to say is, we would have to put that on the agenda for the planning meeting, bring it to the full boards and the public's awareness who just heard this. Thank you. And for discussion and deliberation and voting at the next meeting.
And discussing during this time is the appropriate time to do that.
Then why wasn't it on the agenda?
It's the health and safety plan
Actually,
in
so
general.
Peter,
Honestly,
It
guys.
is on the agenda in this item, 2.01. That's what we're
Where's,
discussing.
could you,
We are discussing.
I am so tired of you guys telling me something's there or something was said when it's not. This motion is not on the agenda.
You're right, because we didn't.
Well, you
want the
just said it
motion.
was,
No,
Mark.
Peter, would you like to listen?
You said
Would
it's
you-
right there.
You know, the only way you can listen is to stop talking.
You said
Would
it
you
was
like
right
to-
there,
Would you
Mark.
like to
Let's-
listen?
let's let Mark
Would you
make
like
his
to
point.
listen?
Yeah, make your point.
I said what's on the agenda is a discussion item under the health and safety plan. So if you actually were listening to me, that's what you would have heard. Your problem is that you only hear what you want to hear. We decided as a board, including Dr. Miller, to not have the motion after Joe asked for it, which is exactly what we've learned to do since the new board was sworn in.
Then why didn't leadership talk to Joe and tell him?
Why
He
didn't
was
Greg-
told,
why
that's
didn't
why
Greg
he
send
made
an
a
email?
motion,
I-
and Greg said, let's wait to the 21st. So we're discussing it now as a discussion item, and we will vote on it on the 21st. This is exactly what we're supposed to do.
He made a
Okay,
motion.
So,
Greg.
Carla, to your question, I can't answer for Greg because I don't know.
Greg also, in his meeting preview, and we as leadership, I've been sending those emails for years, this would have been appropriately highlighted. Instead, what we got late Sunday night included nothing of substance. This one motion, which would be of paramount concern to the community, was not even mentioned.
So discussing different things that different board members may not have put up ahead of time is.
But he did.
so-
It's not, it's not
He
may
did-
not.
he did-
He did.
he did put it up,
But he
and we're
did.
discussing it here
So
in public.
discussing things that board members brought up, not he may have, he did.
He-
Yeah, I mean, Greg, that's not what happened. What happened is he brought it up and you didn't share it with the rest of the board in your weekly update.
And we've done that before as well.
No, we haven't, Greg.
Yes, we
When?
have.
When?
As a matter of fact, it was, I
When?
believe it was February 7th, or it could have been January.
Oh, you
3rd,
guys have
7th.
done it before? Yes, you have.
I'm
Joe-
sorry,
This
can I
board
interject
hasn't.
a moment?
Joe
Because
made
I
a-
feel like
Joe
we're getting
made
off
a
topic, which
question.
is the health and
Joe-
safety plan, and I think it is a
Right.
legitimate.
But it is
moment to
about
give-
proper
Wait a second.
procedure. It's
Okay.
proper
Let's
procedure.
let's let
This
Mr.
is
Salas
the
talk.
appropriate place to discuss something that we may need to make a change with in the very near future. So I would like to have a discussion about the contact tracing. I don't understand why we cannot do that in this moment. Whether the motion was made appropriately or not, or is a real motion or not, I don't think is really an issue, other than the fact that we need to talk about it.
It is because it's disrespectful to the board.
I
It's
don't know. I
disrespect
didn't- I
of
didn't take any
precedent.
disrespect by bringing
I
it
think
up.
that's 'cause you
Possible
knew
to
it was coming,
discuss
Mr.
things, but
Salas.
he made a motion. That's the point. It was how it was conducted. If someone said, I have some thoughts about
Well, if we're gonna
contact
get into the
tracing.
hows
Please,
of
please
how
let
things
me
are being
finish now.
conducted, let's hold
Please,
every one of us
please let
accountable
me
to
finish
how
now.
we do
Let-
Oh,
let's
you can
let-
talk
let's-
over
let's
me
let-
then.
let's let Matt finish.
So it would be fine to discuss that, but that's not what was done. It was thrown out there as a motion, and had Greg not stopped it, it would have set things into motion further. I have no doubt that someone else here probably would have seconded if Greg had not stopped it. So that is the key issue. It's the parliamentary conduct of the board is problematic. It's one thing to have a discussion. It's another thing to throw it out there as a motion. And I think that's all that's being pointed out here. That is not the same thing as saying we don't want to talk about contact
And Greg
tracing.
made that point, and is trying to maybe direct the conversation in the appropriate manner.
He
So
needs
let's
to
have the
hear our
conversation.
concerns.
And the
Okay.
public's
And the
concerned.
public
You
needs to
made
hear
your
them
concerns,
too.
and so did
The
you.
public, I want to make this
No,
clear once.
we're not done yet.
Yes.
Stop telling us and cutting in on us.
No one
Stop
in
it.
this community.
Let's let Matt
No
was
one.
talking first. Let's let Matt finish.
The point is, everything that's being discussed needs to be heard, okay? We can talk about this, but allow us to have an open conversation, not throw it out there like it's a motion and then have to intervene. It creates chaos. It confuses the public. We hear regularly that there are problematic parliamentary actions of this board because people complain about it. So maybe we need to stop doing some of those things and follow a more proper procedure of vetting things in advance, sharing them openly, sharing them with the full board, saying, heads up, we might want to talk about contact tracing. We would love that. The full board. The full board. Thank
And
you.
the public. The public, you want to hold this discussion, Ms. Brusalis, at a meeting night where this topic specifically was intentionally excluded from the agenda. Board leadership had a motion brought to them by Joe for consideration for this. Board leadership chose to remove it from the public-facing agenda. No one in Pine-Richland, except the four, knew that this was coming.
Actually, Peter, that's a misrepresentation.
Who else knew?
Okay, so let me first ask you a question. So first of all, we can decide as a board leadership what goes on the agenda. We did not feel a motion was appropriate, so it was not on the agenda.
I'm waiting for who else knew.
There were numerous meetings that you decided not to put a motion on the agenda under.
Who else knew?
Why do you have to know if there's no motion? If we make a decision not to make.
So how was it a misrepresentation, Mark? Who else knew?
You're misrepresenting the spirit of the agenda.
I'm just stating the fact.
No, you're
These
not.
four people knew and the public did not. If there's another set of facts,
If
I mean,
we
let
what
me know.
sort of
If we
facts do you
decide
have to
not to have a
support
vote on
that?
something, so anyone could bring an idea to board leadership for a motion.
If the facts are uncomfortable, I get it, Mark, but that doesn't make them untrue.
I honestly don't know what you're talking about.
So,
I know.
I'm a bit confused, but I'm going to let Dr. Miller weigh in. He was involved in this discussion as well.
Thank you.
You know, I'm starting to see what some of the comments are directed
mind
to
if
you.
Yeah,
Mark,
accountability
Mark,
is
can we-
uncomfortable, Mark.
Mark and Peter,
You always
can we
gotta
let
be right,
Dr. Miller?
Peter, right?
Okay, so a couple of things. Mr. Cassidy, I know where you stand on contact tracing. We've talked about it before. Okay, so I have individual conversations with people about a number of topics. The fact that Joe would like to see contact tracing removed is of no mystery. I did not receive, for the full board and community's awareness, I did not receive from him a request for a motion to be put on this agenda to eliminate contact tracing, not prior to this meeting, correct?
It came to me and we had the discussion,
Okay.
yes.
Well, so it didn't come to me. So in the board leadership discussion around health and safety, when we discussed what is on the public agenda, which is a short amount of information, there was some conversation during board leadership discussion about interest and emotion, to which I've said, this is something I've talked about with Mr. Cassidy a number of times. I know there are others who feel the same way. I did not know that it was a formal written request for motion. I know he has interest in getting rid of it. There is no mystery there. So I just want, it may be semantic, but I want to make that clear because I did not have that clear understanding. I think that the other thing, we have board leadership now on Thursday. And just so there's no mystery for anybody who hears about these terms that may not understand what that means. Act 65 requires differently a timeline for publication of agendas. And so at Pine-Richland, that has an impact. Used to be that prior to Act 65, that on Monday at noon, the full agenda would be released on board docs, and anybody who wanted to see that agenda was able to do so. Now, 24 hours in advance of that, we have a responsibility to share some aspect of the agenda. And so that means on Sunday night, if you will, by 7:00 p.m., Mrs. Williams has responsibilities not only to release something online, but to post something on the door. And we call that a simple agenda, meaning it's not all of the detail, but it is the items that will be before the board in the subsequent meeting. We have worked collectively to add detail to that simple agenda so that someone who sees it has a relative feeling about what it is that's going to be discussed. In terms of health and safety update, we've done one every meeting for, feels like forever, but certainly for the last 2 years. So in our discussion around this, and again, in what I'm presenting, and I just ask, please, I understand the concerns on all levels. Since the start of this year, we've had 99.5% of our students in-person learning. That's 99.5. We have had every extra and co-curricular activity going on all year, almost without disruption. We've continued to navigate changes in guidance and trying to understand what all that means. But our biggest shared value as a community is that we believe in the value, benefit of in-person learning, and we've had that. A lot of collaboration, a lot of thinking, a lot of sounding boards, strongly held opinions, but at the end of the day, we have all collectively agreed on the value of being in here and staying in here. That's been really good. We need to feel good about that, in my opinion. So as we continue to evolve, we have strongly held opinions about enough's enough, right? Some people say enough. Let's get rid of this. Let's get rid of that. This is how I feel. This is what I think. This is what I'd like to do. And that has led to challenging discussions. Some long nights, long meetings. Think of how quickly things have changed. I mean, we're up over 1,000 cases, 1,002 cases in Pine-Richland this year of students or staff. Almost zero, and I say that, quarantine. Now, those who have had their child quarantined would say, hey, it's not zero. It is a really small number. We've never had to stop programming. We never had to close a school. We were able to keep continuity in learning. And more than any other opinion, that is the most important thing for all of our kids. We had a discussion in December and then again in January about when to make masking optional. Ultimately, that was pushed to February 16th. And it started. And regardless of the survey data we had, the majority of students and staff, when the time came to be mask optional, made a decision not to mask. Others made a decision to continue masking. Everybody should feel welcome. No one should feel poorly in any way, regardless of their decision to mask or not mask. We didn't know that 9 days after February 16th, we knew it was coming. We didn't know it'd be 9 days after February 16th. The CDC approach to what is high, substantial, moderate, and low would change, and the whole structure of that. So February 25th, we get word that they're using different metrics. Now, some would say, told you so. Told you that different metrics needed to be used. But at the end of the day, we are not public health experts. We take guidance from public health experts, and that includes the CDC, the PA Department of Health, and the Allegheny County Health Department. My comments in board leadership are, right now, Allegheny County Health Department and the PA Department of Health and the CDC continue to say, at this point, literally today, March 7th, keep contact tracing and quarantine in schools. That's what they say. Again, we have strongly held opinions about, is this the right time? Is it the right time? There are other districts, some of whom have made the decision to stop it. Stopping it, by the way, once the board takes that action, is as simple as not doing it anymore. Okay, it is pretty simple, and it will be welcome news. But how and when we make decisions as a public organization, and to whom we look for input on things in which we are not experts, is worth our discussion. And so that's the conversation, not that long, that we had at board leadership. So Mrs. Turchik's question came up. What about lunches? Believe me, managing multiple lunch locations is not easy for our staff. Not easy for administrators. It's not easy. It will be easier to manage when everybody's together. Having more students riding the bus will be better in all regards. It'll make arrival and dismissal easier. So we're looking forward to that day with excitement. Right now, I think we should celebrate the fact that our kids remain in school, our programs are operating, our teams are playing, our musical happened at the middle school and will be performing at the high school. And 2 weeks, I don't know if 2 weeks is the right time, but I know things are changing fast. And in 2 weeks, this whole discussion may not even need to happen because that's how quickly some of the guidance is changing. And I know that Allegheny County wants to be there as well. It's just not yet. And so I don't know when the yet is, but every indication is it's coming soon.
So what I'm hearing at this point, contact tracing, Dr. Miller, is not affecting the academic quality that our students are receiving. So this really isn't about the students. It's about a political statement because that's what he believes. He's not separating what he believes about to the business of the district, which is about students. Our students are being successful.
Everyone, could we just please have some decorum?
But yet I could get yelled at.
Just, please, go ahead, Carla.
So, like as an educator, what I'm hearing, like I said, I saw Dr. Justice shake her head. Dr. Justice, elementary schools, are we functioning? Are kids engaged? Are kids learning? Are where we need to be educationally?
I'm proud of where we are right now. Yeah, I think that the students are doing a great job and the teachers.
Dr. Pasquinelli, middle school and high school, are kids engaged? Are students learning?
Yes, I'd say.
So, and to me, am I wrong? It's not the teachers that contact trace, correct? It's the nurses? Or am I confused?
Yeah, so if we were to get information about a case, then we need help to figure out, so there is some communication that happens between the health office, the building administration, and the classroom teachers, basically seating chart related stuff. That gets communicated. It's a little bit more complex now because we have the variables, right? Mask, no mask, vaccine, no vaccine. But ultimately, because the cases are so low, it's a manageable process. And I think the most important thing is we can do it, and we're not reaching places where we need to the good news is kids are staying in school.
I was going to say we're not
but we're
quarantining.
still doing the responsibility.
But there are still some restrictions, i.e. the lunches being one of them, and that was a concern that was brought by teachers.
But that's not
talking
contract.
about-
That's not contact tracing, Greg.
Well, no, but as Dr. Miller said,
Yes,
the
it's
lunches,
removing
if
some of the
contract
mitigations
traces
is
go
what
away,
we're talking
we can bring
about.
those kids in. Part of that discussion was that, hey, that would be healthy for these kids to be at those tables together, to have that engagement.
But I agree, but like I said, going back to the motion that was attempted, that has nothing to do with the educational.
Well, I understand that, Carla. I have heard from a few families that have reached out. Their kids, spring sports started today, and now their kids who were happy to have their masks off to be in school and be with their friends some of these kids are masking again because they don't want to get contact trace, quarantine, miss their sport. And I can understand that. I mean, that to me is something that as a parent would concern me.
I think you'll find you're going to hear from some more families with a different viewpoint now that this is out there. I don't think this is, this is the funniest part. It's like, you guys can't get out of your own way. The CDC did the work on masking for you, as is their responsibility. No fuss, no muss. Other districts throughout the county, many represented here, hi guys, walked through the past 2 months without replacing public health guidance with my friend the chiropractor, my neighbor up the street, the family doctor, because they know more than the CDC. That's what we did. That's scary when Dr. Joe comes up with another thing. I know better. Now, maybe, it's time. It seems like it's time. The CDC has published revised guidance.
And you wonder why you're not going to get my vote?
No, I don't. I know
Peter,
why.
that's so
I know why.
disrespectful.
And-
That's
It's-
very disrespectful.
No, it's exactly, Greg. I'm not done yet. Greg, I'm not finished.
but
Greg,
Peter,
I'm not
it's
finished.
It's a political
Joe,
faction
Dr. Joe. Joe
on,
is-
on
Joe
a
is
road
Dr.
show.
Joe.
We can be, we can be humorous. I
Right.
mean,
But you've done it as well.
no. What I've said is, let's follow the guidance. You have mistakenly mischaracterized our position and the position of this body since the beginning of the pandemic as my solution. We followed the guidance, Greg, not my neighbor, the doctor,
When I
not
say
my
when I
friend,
say that you've
the
done that
chiropractor.
before, you called a large number of our community members irresponsible at one point on what they were choosing to do through the pandemic.
Not following medical guidance from the authorities? Yeah, that's appropriate. I can do that.
Again-
There is a difference. There is conventional medical advice, and that's what's concerning about Mr. Cassidy, is what's next. We don't know. The perception is, doesn't like it because it doesn't meet some political agenda. So as a parent whose child has multiple vaccinations, all of our children do, to enter this school, I start to get concerned. Is that the next area? Will I bring in some doctors who are not mainstream, who are going to start, let's throw that out the window as well? And yes, Greg, I'll characterize that as irresponsible as well. While abandoning contact tracing, which is certainly coming, in connection with the evaluated and considered, deliberate, and sometimes it's slow opinion of the august medical bodies that give it, that's good. It also reduces anxiety in the community because they start to hear it from trusted voices, not from unqualified people who are clearly fulfilling a political agenda, not medical guidance. And if that's awkward or
Greg.
difficult to hear, I'm sorry. It needs to be said, Greg.
Ms. Owen.
Can we move on?
Yeah.
Thanks.
So again, this was a discussion point for health and safety. I think it's been well discussed that's something to consider for the agenda at the March 21st meeting. We will move to, even though this is a planning meeting, we do have board motions to approve. We have a consent agenda. Item 3.01 is the consent agenda for items 3.02 to 3.10 as attached.
Second.
Motion has been made and seconded. Is there any discussion? Prior to vote, I'll just say that there's a number of items in here that took a lot of work to put together, a lot of personnel items that I'm sure Mr. Glickman has, when we approve it in the next 30 seconds, it took a lot more work than 30 seconds to approve. So thank you for all the work on not just that, but everything that's in here. And to get through the consent agenda, I won't mention everything, but just wanted to bring up the fact that there's a lot of work that goes into all these items for the consent agenda. All those in favor?
Yes.
Yes. Yes.
Opposed? Motion passes. Item 3.11 is a motion to approve, hang on, it's got to catch up. Motion to approve the nomination of Peter Lyons as candidate for the Allegheny Intermediate Unit Board.
Second.
Second.
Motion has been made and seconded. Is there discussion? I would like to, if everyone's okay, if you would like to speak, I'd like to defer to Peter first, if that's okay, if you wanted to speak.
No, I'm happy to answer any questions. There haven't been any to date.
Okay.
I have something to say, and so I'll go now, I guess. So I'm sorry that I did not say this at the first vote, and yes, I still feel like I want to say this tonight. So I voted for Peter initially, and I plan to vote for him again. But here's why, and I'm speaking to my board colleagues, and I'm going to try a different tact than anger, than venom, than dislike of Peter. Because frankly, there's something bigger at stake here than personal opinion of Peter. So I'm talking to Christina, I'm talking to Amy, Greg, Lisa, and Joseph. because you guys voted against them. This may not make any difference, but just if you can give me your attention for 2 minutes. So the main beneficiaries of the AIU are our staff and our special needs students. And this is my logic. It's better for them to have Pine-Richland representation on the AIU board than not. And I'd rather have Peter on the board than nobody from PR. Peter wants to continue to serve. Nobody else here does. So that makes a difference to me. Peter has served admirably on the AIU board, and he has proven an asset to stakeholders, again, staff and special needs students. It's a different arena than this arena. The common good is greater than any political differences or dislike that we might have with Peter. And unlike the Pine-Richland board, the AIU board is not policy-driven. It's focused on program and service delivery to staff and students. And, you know, my pastor says some people are EGRs. You know what EGRs are? Extra grace required. And Peter's one of them. But I care about Peter. I really do, just like I care about every one of you. And I could vote for any one of you for something that you really had a heart to do. Peter's imperfect, but guess what? We all are. He deserves forgiveness because we all need forgiveness. You know, the little bit of sample we had of hatred we had tonight, if you felt that, imagine getting that 18 months, unrelenting. It wears on you. And I feel for him. He took the brunt of it. I mean, fact of the matter is, he took the brunt of it. So, by not approving him to serve on the board, people certainly will say he's getting what he deserves. He actually doesn't get out of his own way. He said that about some of us, but he actually is pretty good at it himself. But I love him. As different as we are in opinion, philosophy, I respect him, and I love him as a fellow human. So giving others what's coming to them, that's easy. We do that every day in this country, and it's sad. But treating others with mercy, that's hard, and that's special. So please join me in voting yes. Thanks.
I'd like to build on that. You know, say what you want about the former board. We've had a lot of heated discussions through the years. One of the very first ones I remember was when Dr. Mihalik joined the board. I remember being told by a current board member, who shall remain nameless, that I was being too emotional, which typically is used for women of strong opinion. I've also been called out and told that academics don't live in the real world, which hurts because I live my life in public schools and I run a reading clinic with kids who can't read. So yeah, I live in the real world. But I have chosen to move beyond the mean comments, the spiteful comments, to work with board members. I'm trying with the new board. I've reached out to one person so far. It's baby steps, because I don't feel people want to hear what I have to say and don't value me as a board member. But if we continue to behave the way we are behaving, there is no one we are hurting except for the children of Pine-Richland. We are the adults. We need to act like the adults. So is it abiding by Robert's rules? Yes, it is. Is it being open to discussion? Yes, Christina, it is. but when the public's aware. But if we can't get beyond our ideological differences, if we can't get beyond the venom, the next 4 years are going to be very sad times for our school district, and it breaks my heart. But I see that as the direction we are going.
If I could say a few words, not much more than what's been said. First, I want to thank the board leadership for including this on the agenda tonight. You all didn't have to do that. I'm glad you did. It's important that this important decision be brought out in the open. I want to thank the folks from the AIU who made an effort to come here tonight for all of the letters that you all wrote. It is an overwhelming response in support of Peter's candidacy. And I want to thank Mark. I can't express it better than what you said. That was really moving, and I really appreciate it. All I can add to it is that, to me, this is a straightforward decision. We have an asset that fits nicely into the larger community of services that benefits our kids. Why would we not do that? To me, the needle is so far in one direction for approving Peter that I would like to hear any reason why that needle shouldn't always be set to that yes in this particular case. Pete, have you gotten any feedback from any board member about why, a critique about your performance on the AIU board?
Never in 6 years.
Any current board member approach you and say, I'm concerned about the way in which you approach your service to the AIU?
No, never.
So where are we here? Like, the evidence is pretty strong. So, provide us with some evidence, or this is just going to stand what we think it is. Our intuition tells us this is just a hit job that's being done, that's poisonous. And we're at the place where we can walk back from that now. And I think it would be wise if we did.
I'd like to call the vote.
I have some comments, but I wanted to wait until the board is done first, or however you want to do that, before the vote.
I think we should.
All right. I have comments that I had indicated to Greg I'd like to share.
Okay. All right, that's fine.
I second it. I mean, can I second the vote?
You can, are you pulling it back?
It's up to you, if you're pulling it back.
Well, out of respect for Dr. Millen, we'll let him talk.
Thank you.
Yeah.
So thank you for that, Mark. And again, my comments are not directed to the audience, but to the board. So I appreciate the responsibility the board has to weigh and make decisions. For me, this is 14 years of being a part of school board meetings. 14 years is a lot of meetings. 5 at North Allegheny, and this is my 9th at Pine-Richland. So I definitely get and understand the weight of decision-making on various topics. In my role, I just have the opportunity to be heard on items before the board. And I take that seriously as well, because over the years, board members have asked me for my professional opinion, not my personal one. So as superintendent, I wanted to briefly share that. The first is, I have 2 points. Point number one, and I really, this is important for me to say as the superintendent, I do not want a misconception out there that students with disabilities will not receive quality services for OT, PT, speech, assistive tech, etc. They will receive quality services. They will receive quality services from the AIU in a cost-effective way. That wasn't always the case in the manner in which certain services were delivered. But over time, the efficiency and effectiveness and quality of service delivery from the AIU in certain areas of special education has continued to improve and be enhanced. And so we are generally very satisfied as a district administration, and our families are satisfied as well. I don't want our families to hear the wrong message of this dialogue and think that their children are not going to receive quality services. They will. So that's point one. The second point is I'm a strong advocate for the board to support Peter's nomination to the AIU board. I cannot be any stronger an advocate than I am for him to be nominated to run for election again to participate on the AIU board. So I don't want to be unclear about that at all. As the board has heard, leadership and governance matter. They matter in the short term, and they definitely matter in the long term. Any board seat has a learning curve, and my opinion of the AIU board seats is it's an even steeper learning curve, because the AIU is like this incredible organization that does all this disparate stuff, and nobody sees the whole thing, and it takes years to understand what are all the parts and pieces, how do they fit together, whether it's special schools and programs, or whether it's support for superintendents or assistant superintendents or directors of technology. There's just so much to the AIU that after all the years I've been working, I still have hardly a picture of what it is that happens there. So on the AIU board, that learning curve is even more significant. I do not talk to any AIU board members. I've never talked to any AIU board members about the AIU board, but I do hear feedback from the executive team. They continue to describe Peter Lyons as being a significant value add to that organization in how it's governed, in its focus on executive hiring and evaluation, strategic planning, which is you've seen the strategic plan of the AIU. It was an enhanced process with very clear beliefs and targets, with measurable key performance indicators of how they're going to monitor success. The shared services model, financial management, operational management. What I also know, and it's not like I talk about the AIU with Peter very much, because what I talk about with him, like I talk about with you guys, is Pine-Richland. From time to time, we have talked about the AIU because one of the things that he has experienced is I'm sure every AIU board member experiences, and that's a totally different perspective. When we live in Pine-Richland, we see Pine-Richland. When you're a part of something at the AIU, the diversity immediately is apparent in the various member schools and how that all works together. And so it's humbling, I'm sure, for all of the AIU board members to walk into that room, see, hear, listen, think, feel, and then to be able to compare that to their experiences in their home district and to learn from it and to bring back from that environment practices that are going to be beneficial to their own districts and to be able to serve specifically the mission of the AIU. What we, Pine-Richland, need is the AIU, and the AIU is, I would say, a role model intermediate unit in Pennsylvania. So it's not average, it's an exemplary intermediate unit with significant strengths and plenty of room to improve. The better they operate, the more they are able to be responsive to needs, the better they're able to see the horizon and understand what's happening in public education with very different districts, the more their services will adapt and evolve in order to continue to meet our needs. Whether it's through shared services that are cost efficient and effective for us, or offering the right set of services that we can be able to evaluate and determine if it makes the right decision for us. So from the executive team at the AIU and from my own experiences, having a member of this board on that board helps provide a view and context into public education in our region and in our state differently than if we did not have that perspective. And that's huge. When it comes to his performance specifically at the AIU, I don't see it. I mean, it's not something I do. But from every executive that has ever spoken to me, the feedback I've received about his performance and the impact it's making on that organization is significant. So thank you for that opportunity.
I'd like to call the vote.
Vote's been called. We need a 2/3 majority. We're going to do a roll call vote, Ms. Williams. This is for the approval of
to the vote. I thought it was
Yeah. Okay. Everyone okay with calling the vote?
Yes.
Yep.
Did you want to speak?
I mean, I just wanted to make clear.
It's been called.
Okay.
So it's
Well, then
we've got
you
a
don't get an
we've-
opportunity to hear.
That's the way the rules.
No, Dr. Moore was able to, but okay.
So, Barb, let's do a roll call vote on this one.
Okay. Dr. Meyer,
Yes.
Mrs. Brusalis,
I think
No.
we need,
Wait, hold on.
we
Are we
need
voting to
clarification on,
vote? Are we
Amy would like to
voting on the
clarification on
motion?
No,
Motion
we're voting on the motion to approve
Okay, I
Peter
just
Lyons'.
wanted to be clear.
Yeah.
Okay, sorry.
Yeah, there was consent that.
Okay, that's fine. I just
need-
wanted to check.
Sorry.
Mrs. Hillman,
No.
Mr. Lyons,
Yes.
Mr. DiTullio,
No.
Mrs. Turchick,
No.
Dr. Mahalik,
Yes.
Mr. Cassidy,
No.
Mr. Kashani,
Yes.
5 nays, 4 yays. Motion fails.
Motion fails.
You guys should be ashamed of yourselves. You should be ashamed of yourselves.
Just stare at them as they walk out.
This is ridiculous.
Go ahead.
You don't deserve
I
the
can't
position
believe
you're
that
in.
this district is better than PPS.
So
Y'all are an embarrassment up here. Embarrassment.
I do want to say a couple words for those who spoke on my behalf and the AIU's behalf. Thank you. I feel like I've lived long enough to be present at my own obituary. I would also say, if you'd like, take your leave. It's 8:45. Some of you have traveled very far. Don't feel obliged to stick around. But if you do, we've got more good stuff for you on the agenda tonight. So thank you.
Thank you, Peter. We're going to move to finance. Mr. Kashani.
Item 4.01, informational item for the March 21st meeting. We'll be approving financial reports and accounts payables and paid accounts. 4.02.
Mark, is your mic on? I don't know if
Oh, I'm sorry. My bad. So 4.01, next meeting approving financial reports, accounts payable, and paid accounts. 4.02, next meeting, budget transfers. 4.03, there'll be a motion to approve First National Bank as our new bank, the primary depositor. And on that vote, I'll be abstaining because that's my employer. Item 4.04 is informational item as well. This is a motion to authorize our solicitor to initiate real estate assessment appeals on newly constructed properties within Pine-Richland. There has to be a certain criteria met for that. Item 4.05 is to approve AIU policies, procedures, and use of funds for the next school year. We do that annually. 4.06 is to approve the AIU program and services budget at the next meeting. And then the last item, 4.07, is informational that we had prior to this meeting, a finance governance meeting, where we talked about the need to deal with a couple, 4 specifically, different series of debt that we have. The 2015 note Series A is the one that we had to make a decision on to give Dana some clarity. We've decided to ask her to have a motion to terminate that at the next meeting. And then the other series we're going to discuss again on May 2nd, so we can be a bit more informed before we decide what to do with those. And so the next finance governance meeting is May 2nd. We'll also talk about budget and capital funding plan there too. I think that's it, Greg.
Thank you, Mr. Kashani. Buildings and grounds, Dr. Mihalik, and if I could just point out for everyone moving forward, if you could make any notes on what items that you may want to add to a consent agenda, or if you think they need to be left out, if you would, Barb can capture those.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. DiTullio. Item 5.01 is an information item for board consideration at the regular March meeting, a motion to approve a proposal in the amount of $10,000 from Tower Engineering to conduct HVAC studies at Hance Elementary and Wexford Elementary as attached. And I know this is, I guess, the beginning of a process to document what could be some large capital expenditures going forward. Anything you want to say about that?
Mr. Zimmerman is on the call, so you want to share any additional background, Jeff?
Yes, so in 2019, we conducted surveys at Richland Elementary and at the middle school, which are going to help us determine the process for determining the HVAC upgrades that we do there in the capital funding plan. These evaluations for Hance and Wexford will be in the same manner. It'll help us determine how we replace the large capital items at each building, such as the boilers and chillers, and how each one of those transfers heat or cooling into the rooms through the univentilators.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Zimmerman. I would be comfortable putting that in as a consent item. Item 5.02 is an information item. It will be a motion at the regular March meeting to approve the purchase of replacement carpeting for portions of Wexford, Richland, and Eden Hall upper elementary schools and the high school. We don't have an amount yet on that. Any additional information on that carpet item?
Yeah, so this is just a continuation of our carpet projects that we've been doing for the last 2 years. This round of carpet will include the 4 schools noted there. And so we use a CoStars process to source the carpet, and then we have multiple bidders come through and provide quotes. So we'll be doing it as a CoStars quote process for that. And this year, we're a little bit ahead of where we were in years past because of the long lead times for carpet fiber. So that's the reason it's showing up so early this year.
Thanks. And I guess we'll wait to see what the numbers look like, but if they're reasonable, then that could be a consent item as well. Then item 5.03 is the an information item for a motion to approve the purchase and installation of an amphitheater roof cover over the outdoor classroom at Hance Elementary from Snyder Recreation in the amount of $24,444 through CoStars. Funding for this project consists of a school district cost of $22,444 and $2,000 from the Prof Fund.
Thank you, Dr.
And that could be on a consent item as well, too. Okay, thank you.
If anyone has as the various board members talk about their areas, if anyone says, hey, I want that one definitely left out, please voice an opinion. At this point, the only possible objection, and Dr. Mihalik, I'll refer to you first on if you think costs are reasonable, and I'm sure Dana will chime in on that as well. But I think we all have a concern over cost in general with what's going on, inflation rise, and budget. So.
I do have an estimate. I'm sorry, I don't think I'm on yet. Or am I? Oh, I
Yeah,
am.
that's fine.
I
I do have an estimate built into the capital funding plan that was attached to the Finance Committee section this evening. So there is an estimate in there that should cover each of these. But again, any adjustments will occur between now and May 2nd in that capital funding plan as well. So we're hoping that we'll get some really good pricing on that.
Thank you.
Thank you. Academic achievement, Dr. Meyer.
This is an informational item for the March 21st meeting. Pine-Richland District currently has 9 departments in implementation phase of in-depth program review: science, health, PE, math, business, computer science, social studies, gifted, music, library, and ELA. Updated resources to support the PRSD online written communication is often recommended based on future-focused planning. The current advanced placement AP English textbooks are outdated. The textbooks company no longer support the online resources. Over the past 5 years, we have had 123 course requests for AP English for grade 11 and 55 course requests for AP English for grade 12. A committee made up of the secondary teachers and administration will participate in the review. Parents and students. It is integral into the evaluation process, and the College Board provides the curriculum for these courses.
Dr. Meyer, I can jump in.
I was just going to say,
Yeah.
I was going to pass it to you, but just out of curiosity, I don't know if you guys know this, but it'd be interesting for the March 21st meeting. Approximately how many of our students take advantage of actually getting college credits? Like, like my son got several college credits. So it helps them save money. So approximately how many of our students are taking advantage of this opportunity?
We can get that for you
Yep,
for the
that'd be great.
21st. I don't know off the top of my head.
Okay.
I would say we have a large percentage of our students that explore AP as an option.
Okay.
Or college within high school, too.
Okay, thank you.
But just one of the couple key things coming up, so we just wanted to keep everybody updated of the evaluation process for these new textbooks. Again, for AP 11, AP 12 English. Completed the first 2 rounds of evaluations. They finished up on February 22nd. The evaluations are finished. Next step is where the community and students get engaged. So next week we will have, again, fortunate to have it back in person and virtual, is an opportunity to see these 2 different textbook series. You can see them online, so get a good chance to look at what's being provided for the students. And then we do collect input from parents, community, and students as well as part of the evaluation process. And then at our next board meeting, we'll have an executive summary summarizing the whole evaluation process, and then having a recommendation for one of those 2 to be placed on a 30-day review, and that gives the community additional 30 days to review those resources.
Great, thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Meyer. Student Services, Ms. Hillman. Sorry, Mrs. Hillman. Apologize.
Item 7.01, this is an information item for board consideration at the regular March meeting, March 21st. It's a motion to approve the attached updated list of student organizations and officers for the Pine-Richland High School and Middle School for the 2021-2022 year in compliance with board policy number 618, student account funds.
Would everyone be good with that one moving into
Yeah, we
consent
can add
items as
that.
well?
Yeah.
Okay. Thank you, Mrs. Hillman. Staff Services, Mr. Cassidy.
8.01, that was part of the consent agenda earlier tonight. No?
Sorry. This is information that will be presented for additional at the March 21st meeting, I believe.
Correct.
Okay. For board, this information on for board consideration at the regular March meeting. Motion to approve the PREA, PRESPA personnel, athletic, non-athletic supplementals as attached. 8.02 is an information for board consideration at the regular March meeting. Motion to approve the first reading of the batch policies 900 community as attached. The Community 900 policies were last reviewed in May of 2017.
Okay, I met the other day and we went over them. There's a couple changes. There's not anything very much. If you want to look through this, earlier tonight we talked about 903. There were no changes to 903, but that is something that we would, do something to consider for the next meeting.
I mean, is that something we can pull out now to be considered separately, 903?
This isn't for vote. This is
I know,
just
but
the
for
first
next-
reading.
Yeah,
when
for
we-
next time,
For
yes.
next time. Is this an appropriate time? to-
Yeah, so just as a follow-up to Mrs. Brusal's comment, any board member who wants a policy pulled out of the batch to be addressed sort of individually or singly can do so. We typically have not held back the batch because of one or two policies that might be pulled. The challenge, though, is we've got to coordinate that. So we've got to come up with a game plan on, when, how, where is that conversation going to happen? If it's, I don't know how to define reasonable, but if it's reasonable conversation, meaning not too long, then this is an appropriate time to talk about it. It's sometimes easier to just talk about it, determine whether we want to do anything, and if so, leave it in the batch, but make the adjustments that are suggested. So I'll defer to Greg on that. So it can be pulled. It doesn't have to be pulled. If it is pulled, we got to figure out when we're going to talk about it.
So since this is fairly fresh, I don't know if everyone wants to take a look at that for March 21st. We can discuss, does anyone want to have any language changes? If you have some ideas now, obviously we can discuss those, but I think maybe taking the next 2 weeks to read the policies, in particular 903, to see if there's any changes. There was some obvious discussion there, so we can look at pulling that out. Hopefully it would be minor, if anything, and we could keep it along with the reads.
Yeah, I think that's a good idea, to isolate that one. In addition to what we already talked about, the one thing, after tonight too, I think if you're going to speak, it should be your words, not someone else's email that you're reading. I think that's, I just don't think, I think that goes against the spirit of speaking.
How can,
I
it's a
agree.
First
Speech-
Amendment issue.
I was going to say, are we getting into free speech issues here?
Yeah, I
No, attend the meeting and give it, or call in.
People can
Since
stand
when
up and
does- since
read
when does
whatever they
reading an
want.
email that someone else wrote, it just seems, that seems odd.
That's called
Yeah, and we've allowed that before, but it's certainly a discussion item that we had. When I say we've allowed it before, it's happened before, whether it was intentional or not.
It's just something to
But
think about.
I understand what you're saying. I think that maybe everyone would be more prepared to discuss it at the 21st meeting,
And
unless
I
you wanna get
definitely
into it.
think that's something that needs to be
Yeah.
discussed with the solicitor.
Yeah.
And I'd like to, just so we're thinking about it, and maybe not discuss it today, is the two things that kind of stick out to me. One, the discussion tonight is that I think maybe we should revisit that on who has
Yep.
standing here and who doesn't. And also the, pull it up here, I'm not going to get it right, but in this policy, there is some reference to not directing comments at individuals, and we have not police that
Right.
well or policed it at all, and I think it should be taken out, but I think I'd like to have a discussion around that. I do think there's some case law that says you can't, like you said, can't control, can't police the content of what people say, and I think that includes us as public officials, whether we're elected or we are, leading our school district as superintendents, assistant superintendents, whatnot, principals, that we can't tell people they can't call us out for good or bad reasons, because if we police them for bad things, saying bad things about us, then we certainly can't have them saying good things either, and we allow
Yeah.
both in practice, I think. So I think taking that out might be a good thing as well.
The one thing I'd like to add too is if, with this policy, it's up to board leadership to enforce it. And I know for the fact during some of the very contentious meetings last year, there were people outside the district who were allowed to speak, who had no stakeholder. They weren't AIU, they weren't, so we need to seriously talk about this, and, what we decide on, we have to stick to, even if it gets uncomfortable.
So I just want to be clear that this is going to be pulled. 903 is being pulled
Yep.
from the first read. Okay.
But on the agenda for next, for the 21st
For discussion.
For discussion, yes.
I would just add, Mr. Palmer will likely be here, and I think it'd be worthwhile, perhaps, Greg, for you to reach out to him, or you and Amy to reach out in advance. So if there are any questions board members have, things you want to clarify in the language of 903, that you want him to prepare for and be able to speak to, so we save as much time as possible and get right to whatever it is we're getting to.
All right, 803, information item. Staff Services Governance Meeting is scheduled for April 18th, 2022. A staffing update will be provided.
Just one question, and this goes back to all the 8s. Is everyone comfortable with 801 once the supplementals are added in, as pretty standard practice? And then 802 minus 903, that sounds funny. 8.02 minus policy 9.03. 9.03 will still be in staff services for discussion, but 802 and every other for first read in the consent agenda.
Yes.
I'm confused, so let me walk through this again. So you're asking to put 801 and 802.
No, 903 we're going to pull out of for consent agenda to look at policy 903, but it.
I just heard 8 something.
Sorry.
8.01
and 8.02 as 8.01 as written, 8.02 as written minus policy 903.
So with I'd like to see who the supplementals are.
Yeah. So if you don't want it, that's
I prefer if it does not
okay.
go in.
All right. 802 minus policy 903. Everyone comfortable with that as a consent?
Is that standard procedure when you're doing 3 reads of a policy?
Not typically, no. So that's why
In a consent agenda. So I mean,
we can leave it all in.
I think the reason why you do 3 reads is to let the public know that there are
Yep.
important things changing in policies. So I think it makes sense for us to have that. I would also add, sooner, if you have questions on language in any of the 900s, sooner rather than later is always helpful. That way we can tweak it if we need to, and then still move through the 3-read process.
I'd like to pull 915. I think there's been, not necessarily to suggest changes, but we've seen that policy evolve over the years, and it's been a good discussion, going through that discussion, and maybe there's some suggestions that would come out of that. I'll leave that with leadership. Maybe that's more appropriate at a certain joint governance meeting in the near future. We can pull it out of the batch for now as we read through these, but it sticks a pin, right, Mark? It leaves it there for us to pick back up some point?
Yeah, that's a good one, because we've talked about, in other meetings recently, I know we've talked about those groups, so that's a good one to pull, yeah.
Do you have any specific changes to think about? And I agree, that's one that we should look at.
I don't.
Because it's new.
It's newish. It has evolved. There's some things we can do. You read the policy, the objectives that the board framed behind this policy do not come jumping out at you, right? Like, what were we thinking? Why? And are they achievable via policy? Right? It's not clear. So having that discussion, that may engender further specific policy changes that, hey, okay, now understanding what you're trying to do, let's change this. But I think that's a useful conversation, and it doesn't have to take place in the next month or two, but obviously this policy needs to be reviewed, in this school year, hopefully.
Yeah, and I think you and I may have a different perspective too than maybe any other board member, because we've been on the user end of 915 as well. So,
and this thing goes way back too. Yeah. So. Just as a heads up, 800s are underway too. So 800s are coming, and then 100s are coming. So we've got a lot coming.
All right, so we're done. Operational services, Mrs. Bursellis.
So So agenda item 9.01 is an information item for board consideration at the March 21st meeting. And it is a motion to authorize the advertisement to bid for liquid propane gas commodity storage and delivery services. And I'm wondering if this should be on the consent agenda.
I have a question about that. So maybe the administration can address this. Does it make sense to do a 7-year contract for this? Because today I saw a note that green hydrogen is cheaper than natural gas today. So 7 years from now, with geopolitical instability, does it make sense for us to be locked into a contract like that? Does it make more sense for us to shorten the term there, knowing that that's probably not where most people will be in that period of time?
The comment that I'll make on that is our contract with
That's the rationale
STA.
for why, but I mean, Dr.
Yeah.
Mihalik's point is fair
Yeah.
and understood.
100%.
But the point of the 7 years was to tie into the length of the STA contract with a largely propane-based
And the
fleet.
other difference is that we have not been able to, if you remember last year when we did a 1-year bid, we didn't receive any, and then we had to rebid it. Oftentimes, we don't get very many bidders, because in order for a propane company to be competitive at this point against our current vendor, who owns the tank that's there, they either have to purchase the tank from the existing vendor, or they need to bring in their own at their cost and then be able to depreciate that cost of the tank over X number of years. So is there a magic number? I don't know that. Unfortunately, I have minimal experience with propane other than bidding it often. So I do know that 1 year doesn't work well. 2 years has not worked well. 7 may be too long, but we have heard from competing vendors that they're unable to depreciate the cost of a tank in a shorter time frame. So I don't know the exact answer. I can just tell you that we were trying to align with the end of our existing agreement with STA.
I mean, it's helpful to understand the full picture and context, so I appreciate that. Yeah.
This may be about
Maybe
the
we
worst
could
time to bid it too.
Yes, exactly. Right.
I would say that not go into the consent agenda until wait, it's just for the bid. No, I'm okay with that going into the consent. Is everyone else then?
Yeah.
Okay.
And then agenda item 9.02 is a reminder that there is an operational services governance meeting scheduled for June 20th.
Thank you, Mrs. Bursalis. Move to board business. Reminder of joint governance meetings 10.01. March 14th, we will have a diversity, equity, and inclusion meeting. March 21st, we will have a sustainability meeting. And April 4th, another diversity, equity, and inclusion meeting. I believe those are all that we have some others, but yeah, okay.
That's what we've captured.
Yep.
So far. I have a thought. Is this for discussion, or is this?
Yeah, they're always. Yeah, it's information and discussion.
So, in thinking through this and respecting this timeline, so does it make sense after the March 14th meeting, and maybe even during the March 14th meeting, if there's not significant enough progress made on meaningful wording changes to 832? Because we tabled that a long time ago. You know, if you may remember, last fall I proposed we not even get into the reads until the board was recalibrated, but we did. All the stuff that happened in December, January did not permit us to do a third read. We mapped out this timeline to get the conversation going again. In my opinion, there has not been any changes to the policy since the second read, from what I've seen. And unless there is, then I would propose we do the third read on the 21st of March. That's not to say that, so whatever the outcome is, but we use the 14th to either discuss meaningful changes to that policy, which I think then would reset the counter on the reads, right, which is fine. Or if there's no progress to that extent made, then we just bring it to a vote on the 21st, see what happens, and then start over anyway, if it doesn't pass, right? On, we can get into the weeds on it on April 4th. But what I really think we need is a D&I policy specifically that is designed for us. That's data-driven, meant for every student. It's every student-centered. So I wanted to offer that.
I agree, Mark. And hopefully this next meeting will be the time where we, can actually flesh that out, because I don't think we've done, all of us have done enough on getting that language right. We're really going through it. And you've been in meetings where we've done that, and so we haven't done that yet. I wouldn't commit to a specific course, because I don't want it to be, if we can't get that language there, I don't want to say, well, then the old policy goes up, because the old policy is a sort of dead letter. So I don't want to commit to sort of bringing that old policy up just because we couldn't agree on the new language at that meeting,
Well, but that's what, I guess, so that it's not a surprise, right? I'm kind of doing this now because I want to state it publicly that I would like to bring this to a third read. It's been hanging out there, so either we actually change the words and do it over, or we do it over by just killing it and starting over.
Well, yeah, you don't have to read it then, the third reading, right? But I hear you saying.
I mean, I've been very open with my vote against it for 2 reads now. Nothing's changed. So for me, nothing's changed.
Right, because we haven't. I want to get those suggestions from you. What you want to. Yeah. So let's get those changes on the policy at the next meeting.
But I don't want. So just to be clear, though, I don't want to be accused of a surprise and pull a Joseph on us here, because I'm going to propose that motion, right, for 21st. Depending on the outcome of the 14th.
If there's not significant language.
Exactly, right. A Yoda.
Will you be,
a Yoda.
Mark, will you be making specific language amendments? Because to date, as this policy has come up, you have never proposed any changes to language. You've objected to it and voted no. But in terms of constructive engagement, I would think it would look more like, I propose we amend the language in this manner. And I'm curious, if you intend to bring some of that stuff forward.
Well, I brought some, and I've been very specific with some of the language I did not like.
And
but I'll be prepared with more.
Were those changes made or not made?
No, they weren't. And I'll be prepared with a lot more, which I hope my colleagues will as well, on the 14th.
Okay, I don't remember any specific amendments, but we'll go back and take a look.
So the thinking game plan, correct me if I'm wrong, for next Monday, we'll start with sort of an overview of what's been going on related to the DEI initiative. This is part of our strategic plan. So what's been going on? That'll be a beginning portion of it. We talked about an internal audit to be conducted by largely district personnel, including members of the board and others. I mean, it's not a small group, but it's a group, and that's using some sort of a tool such as the Mid-Atlantic Equity Audit. The group also identified an additional question for each of the stakeholder surveys. So we had a question in each of the student, parent, or staff surveys. A second question has been developed for the board to be able to review. And then moving into discussion of 832, where there's going to be, just to be clear, some pretty significant suggested changes to what's in there and what's not in there that are built on listening to this board, listening to the Anti-Racism Coalition, listening to the Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion Leadership Council. So I think it'll be enough different that, if somebody says, where did this come from? It came from a lot of listening to a lot of different viewpoints. And so I think we're going to start with a number of differences. So again, my only comment would be that any preparation that would be beneficial would be reviewing the likely recommended internal audit tool. The questions in there are very focused around instruction and learning in schools, and I mean, it's good, and we have it posted online and available via link, correct? We have a website, and this is for anybody in the community who wants to look at it, but on our website, it has the most recent slide deck, everything that was included and discussed in the most recent DEI Leadership Council meeting. And so again, hopefully it's a good work session. Mrs. Williams asked me this afternoon, should we do the horseshoe? Because the board will remember at times it creates a more working environment when we physically arrange the room in certain ways, which is nice. The downside is if we have participants here, it doesn't feel good when there's a horseshoe and there's people. It just doesn't feel connected. So even though this isn't the best design, at least it allows everybody to see each other, which I think is important to the process. So again, I expect there to be significant changes. And again, for everybody's awareness, when there are significant changes, it's like the first two reads didn't even happen. You know, we're back to the drawing board, and so then there's no need to go through an artificial third reading when it's sort of changed. So,
Can we discuss while we play horseshoes? Is that an option? That'd be fun.
What may be useful is if any members of the community, I know everyone's not listening, but if you are interested in coming, just send an email and I hate to throw this on Barb, just how many people might be coming. We can determine what the best layout is. I would think that that's going to have enough participation that this is probably where we're going to end up, but it is a bit more comfortable from a board standpoint to have those horseshoes in those workshops, but I get it. Review of our board workshop for informational item 10.02, and I'm going to slide this over to Mark at first because Mark was the architect. What were you?
Well,
you weren't Yoda.
Dr. Mill and I were collaborating. Well, we collaborated.
Yeah.
Well, this was a board workshop where first Barb was so kind to make us some nourishment that we were able to partake in and fellowship together over a meal. We've done these since Dr. Miller's been here, and the spirit of these is to help us in a less formal setting, just get to know each other. We try to make them fun. We try to make them something that members here look forward to. We don't get into any issues or anything like that that would be and should be out in public, but it is more of a sort of a team building kind of a event, and we do stuff like we personality type each other, so we understand, when you understand someone's personality type, you can appreciate how they're wired and where they're coming from. This year we did something fun because I'm a Star Wars nerd. We had our normal Myers-Briggs personality, and then we mapped it to Star Wars. So I'm really jealous of Joseph, if I may, Joseph. No? Okay, I won't. All right. But I'm really jealous of his type. I wish I was him. But it is a lot of fun. We have some fun, and we also take it seriously, but not ourselves. We try to lighten it up a bit, and that's probably good.
Anything to add, Dr. Miller?
Yeah, but not that I think will add value. So.
Okay, all right.
I don't mean that.
Yeah. Reports. Does anyone have any reports for this meeting? Nope, seeing none. We will move to item 11.02, second recognition of visitors.
We have one in person, and right now one online.
Okay.
Mike Barber.
Hello, Mike Barber from Richland Road. I am speaking in support of Policy 832. I am obviously not a black and clearly do not know what it is like to be a black American. These are facts. However, it is also a fact that I do not have to deal with the repercussions that have reverberated through generations from Virginia's Black Codes of 1705, the Three-Fifths Compromise, the Articles of Secession, the Emancipation Proclamation, the Jim Crow policies. Another fact is that current black students are absolutely, without a doubt, forced to shake off groups of white kids casually and ignorantly using the N-word. An experience that looms like a rain cloud hovering over their everyday education. So when I hear Pine-Richland residents crying Policy 832 is equal to CRT and school board members are unable to see past the policy's definitions, it is clear that we as a community have a lot to learn when it comes to race relations in America. One school board member that represented me told me on voting day that we likely agree on 90% of issues. We agreed the district needed to diversify the staff and teach accurate history. Your suggestion of Madam Walker as an individual who should be highlighted more in our kids' American history classes was brilliant. I could not agree more. Including her and others who have overcome the aforementioned man-made obstacles will only enrich every child's American education. One thing I also think we can agree on is that most parents want the richest possible education for their child. So I'm wondering, what have the 6 individuals opposed to Policy 832 done to learn and understand why PR families are supporting this policy? When discussing this policy, I'd like to hear about the board's engagement with these PR families. Although I chose to focus on the racial elements of the policy, there are many benefits that extend beyond the racial components. Special needs students are also a significant component of Policy 832. I'm sure most parents are supportive of their inclusion. So why then are policies to protect special needs students so widely accepted, but similar policies to protect minority students are so incredibly controversial? Support Policy 832. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Our online speaker is Therese Dawson. Mr. Stovener? Hello?
Hi.
Hi, Mrs. Dawson. You're on the line with Pine-Richland Board.
Okay. Can I talk now?
Yep, go ahead.
Okay. Hi, I tuned into the board meeting and I wanted to share some of my observations. First of all, I think that it's kind of sad that the board meetings have been reduced to somewhat of the equivalent of a live TV show, like a reality show. There's an absence of discourse, and I think that spending that much time on an AIU vote that was already voted on with the same result was quite disappointing. Also, I think the most important topic is the issue of sexual abuse and bullying that seems to be coming up over and over again, but not getting any attention. So rather than spend our time demonstrating middle school behavior with upper level degrees, I think that we need to do a little bit more to meet the real needs of the community. Thank you.
Thank you. Ms. Williams, was that our last visitor? Okay. All right, this meeting is now adjourned.